NXT Takeover Phoenix, which was live last night from the Talking Stick. And what it said was, damn, that was a great show. Poll results so far, over 3,500 votes, 77% thumbs up, only 3% thumbs down. 20% of you said that you did not watch. It was not the best takeover card that they've done. And yes, they have their formula, but the formula works for them. Never have more than 5 or 6 matches, usually 5, although there have been shows that have had 6 before. So it never overstays its welcome. You never feel like, man, when is this show going to end? If anything, it just breezes by. You're like, that's it? They know how to tell proper stories. They give them time to breathe. They give them time to develop. And the action, of course, is almost always incredible. If you want great tag team wrestling, you got that. If you want high spots and crazy moves, you got that. It's not just one or the other. So when I hear people give this show a thumbs down, as I did last night, because it's formulaic. Look, Raw is not a bad show because it's formulaic. That's not the reason why Raw is a bad show. Raw is a bad show on most weeks because the formula they happen to use sucks. And doesn't get anybody over. Believe me, if these takeover shows were all 4 hours long, you wouldn't have as many people thumbing them up as you do now. They would still largely get thumbs up, but it is a lot harder to do a 4-hour show without people getting tired or people getting bored than it would be doing a 2 or 2.5 hour show. The formula still works for them, but to call it a thumbs down show because of that, oh, it's formulaic, I got to give it a thumbs down, to me that's insane. That's absolutely insane. But again, that was only reserved for the 3%. So it was more than one person, but not a lot of people who said that. But when I heard that, I just couldn't believe it. It's perfectly fine to think, the show's got a formula. I think they should kind of break it up a little bit, maybe do this, do that. But to say the show was a thumbs down show because of that, I don't know what those people were watching. I got all but one prediction right, which is good. I had Bianca Belair winning by DQ to keep her undefeated streak intact. That didn't happen. It is interesting. I don't know how many people really actively were noticing this last night, but it is interesting to see these takeover shows completely dominated by outside experienced talent. Usually with maybe one homegrown talent on the card, just to illustrate how far we have strayed from this idea that NXT is a developmental promotion or a developmental territory. You look at those early shows with guys like Tyler Breeze, who spent 5 years in developmental before he even found himself as that character. Tyler Breeze, Baron Corbin, Elias, Dana Brooke, Nia Jax, American Alpha. Right? You look at those early takeover cards, and there were a lot of people on there, even up until just a couple of years ago, who really did not have a career or much of a career on the independent scene. They came to NXT. They just tore them down, built them back up, and you can call them homegrown talent if you want to. It would be accurate to call them that. You look at the War Games show in November, the takeover before the one from last night. The only quote-unquote homegrown talent, and I know he did work some indies, but, he did the Tough Enough show. He signed with WWE and got a completely new character that has just worked for him. The only one on that War Games show that you can call homegrown if you want to was the Velveteen Dream, who wrestled Tommaso Ciampa. On this show last night, the only homegrown name was Bianca Belair. All of the others were made, the War Raiders, Undisputed Era, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, Aleister Black, Ricochet. Matt Riddle was an independent guy, but a fairly big independent name, I would say. He also worked in Evolve, so I wouldn't call him homegrown. Cassius Ohno is another one. He's a veteran who was on the card last night. This is obviously why these shows are so good. But a lot of those takeovers, the early ones, they were really good too, even with more of the homegrown names. You just got to pick your spots and know how to use the less experienced people and put them with people who know how to work. I just thought it was interesting how Bianca Belair was the only one on that show last night. We have the War Raiders against the Undisputed Era for the NXT Tag Team Championship. We have a very cool Viking entrance for the War Raiders here. Made them seem big time. So that was cool. The finish of the match came. Kyle O'Reilly was laid out with this pop-up running power slam. Roderick Strong was knocked out of the ring. Hansen, he had kicked out of this big superplex top rope knee drop combo from Undisputed Era. When O'Reilly hit that top rope knee, the first person I thought of was Rick Rude. I used to remember Rick Rude using that move in a lot of his matches. In fact, he might have beaten Sting, I think, for the championship over in Japan when they wrestled. I think he might have beat him with the big knee drop off the top rope. That might have been his last match, after he got hurt. But Hansen kicked out of that. There were a lot of near fall, like some real near falls that the fans totally bought into, and they were going crazy and chanting NXT and this is awesome and all the usual chants you would expect from this crowd. But in the end, the War Raiders, they hit the fallout on Kyle O'Reilly and they got the pin and they are the new tag team champions. I thought this was great. I thought this was the second best thing on the entire show and an absolute clinic when it comes to tag team wrestling. You watch a match like this, you listen to that crowd, and you wonder, how can things be the way they are on the main roster? How can the tag team division on the main roster be in the state that it is in, especially on Monday Night Raw, even more so than SmackDown? How is it possible? How is it possible that the tag team division can be in the shape that it's in when we routinely get tag team matches like this on the quote-unquote third-rate brand, call it whatever you want? Why do so many NXT teams that thrive here go to Raw and SmackDown to die? And I don't want to hear, well, not everybody who gets over in NXT in front of that audience is going to get over on the main roster. That's true, but that is a bullshit cop-out argument, and I don't want to hear it. Because that would be fine if it applied to one or two teams. This happens all the time. You cannot tell me that every single one of these teams is just going to flop on the main roster because there's absolutely nothing about them that audience is going to like. One or two teams is one thing. 3, 4, 5 teams, it becomes a regular thing. It ain't their fault. There's something else going on here. A healthy, thriving tag team division could be a lot of fun and could add a lot of excitement to those shows. And you want to shake things up? Start with that. Start with the tag team division. We had Matt Riddle and Cassius Ohno. This was obviously a step down from that opener, but I think anything in that spot would have been. This was the weakest match on the entire show. It was fine, though, for what it was. I didn't really care much for it, but it was fine. They had Ohno gave Riddle a nasty stomp at one point during this match to the mouth that connected a little too well, and he bloodied up Riddle's mouth with it. They also did the foot spot. Remember, I think I talked about this once on the podcast. A number of years ago, I was at an independent show here in Brooklyn, and there was a match between Tommy Dreamer and Matt Riddle. And Matt Riddle, of course, never wears any shoes. That's just how he wrestles. And there was this one spot where Tommy Dreamer, he took Matt Riddle's foot and he put it in his mouth and he bit down on his foot. And I remember everybody, at least this time, unlike that show that I was at, Ohno this time didn't get the loud chants of "you sick fuck" the way that Tommy Dreamer did on that show. But I was just waiting. It was only a matter of time before they did that spot, and sure enough, there it was. Riddle went for a German suplex. Ohno was too heavy for him, so Ohno stomped on his bare foot. That's the problem when you don't wear shoes. I'm just saying. Riddle then ended up hitting a German suplex, just muscled him up. Ohno's a big guy, and he just muscled him up, and Riddle ended up just raining blows down upon him at the end, just elbows, and finally Ohno just tapped out. He couldn't take it anymore. It was just raining elbows down upon him, and he gave up. And so Matt Riddle has vanquished Cassius Ohno, hopefully for the final time. And, my Royal Rumble predictions, I threw Riddle's name out there as a possibility for somebody we could see as an NXT surprise in the Royal Rumble match. Not that they're going to call him up to the main roster, but I think we might see him in the Rumble tonight. Him and Velveteen Dream, I think, are the two names to watch for tonight. We had Ricochet defending the NXT North American Championship against Johnny Gargano. This was the match of the night. For the second January in a row, Johnny Gargano delivers. He is your MVP, or in this case, co-MVP. This was a game of one-upsmanship here for much of this match between these two guys. All the crazy counters to the big moves. Ricochet went for the 630. Gargano was smart enough to roll away slowly, and he rolled outside of the ring. Ricochet looks at this. He says, no problem. And he does a running dive out over the ring post and hits Gargano out on the floor. Gargano at another point teased doing a draping DDT onto the exposed concrete. He had picked up the ring mats outside, but he had a change of heart, right? Because Johnny Gargano is not this evil guy at heart. So he's got to think, God, do I really want to do this? And he decides, you know what, I'm not going to do it. And the fans actually booed him for it. So that tells you these fans of the heels here. It was like Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 8, right? The ref took a bump. Bret Hart is bleeding. He's on his knees. Piper has the ring bell in his hand, and he's got to make a choice. Do I whack this guy, who's a good friend of mine? Do I whack this guy in the head with the ring bell and take the cheap win or not? Now, the Roddy Piper of old, in 1985, would have whacked Bret Hart 10 times in the head with that bell. The Roddy Piper in 1992, he decided against it, and what happened? He lost. That's what happens. When you try to be a nice guy, you get fucked. That's a life lesson for you. So in this case, Johnny said, nah, I'm not going to do it. Thankfully for him, though, he was able to make up for that because later on he decided to go ahead and do it anyway, and he gave Ricochet a brainbuster on the exposed concrete. Rolled him back into the ring, hit a slingshot DDT, which Ricochet sold like death, and he got the pin. And Johnny Gargano, for the first time, is a singles champion in NXT. He is the new North American champion. Flashy as Ricochet is, and we know how great he is at what he does. There is nobody who can do many of the things that Ricochet does. Nobody else can do that. We know that. I still think that Johnny Gargano may be the most purely talented performer that they have on any roster, Raw, SmackDown, or NXT. It is insane, this guy's body of work and what he is able to do in the ring and the way he tells stories just through his facial expressions, his mannerisms. He is just fantastic. And this was just another, hey, if he's making a resume for himself, here's another match to throw on the old resume. We had Bianca Belair, the undefeated Bianca Belair, challenging Shayna Baszler for the NXT Women's Championship. I thought this was a good match that I think showed why someone like Bianca Belair is going to benefit and would benefit from spending another year in NXT. You can see superstar written all over her, but she's not ready yet. Shayna is ready. I expect Shayna to be up on the main roster this year, probably sooner than later. So when they want her, she'll be ready. Belair, she's not there yet. They did give her the visual pin on Shayna after a ref bump. The other two horsewomen interfered, but they were quickly disposed of. There was one point where Belair used the hair whip. Now, because earlier in the match, Shayna actually had a pretty clever spot where they're both outside by the ring post. She grabbed a hold of that long braid from Bianca's head and pulled her forward like a tug-of-war and pulled her face first right into the post. It's like when IRS used to wear the tie and people would grab it and they would choke him with it. Gorilla Monsoon would be like, that's what he gets. That's what he gets for wearing a tie. Well, that's also the downfall of having a long braid like that, is that other people can use it against it. That thing's got a life of its own. That thing scares the shit out of me. It's like something out of The Thing. Like if it detached from her head, I feel like it would just kind of scurry off. It's a long braid. But she was able to get a hair whip in on Shayna late in the match. And if you look, it caused a really nasty cut on Shayna's abdomen. Baszler locked in the Kirifuda clutch. Belair strong-armed her way out of it, powered her way, muscled her way out of it the first time. Very impressive. The second time, though, she tried and she fought back up to her feet, reached for the ropes, and just collapsed. And in the end, she went out like a light. Referee called for the bell. Bianca Belair is undefeated no longer, which I don't have a problem with. I know some people were bothered by that. Why beat her? Why end the streak? Not everybody needs a streak. You know what I mean? Like, I know she kind of incorporated it into her gimmick, but not everybody has to go on an undefeated streak for a year. If everybody goes on an undefeated streak for a year, after a while, it doesn't mean anything. So she lost. She put up a great fight. They made her look great. I thought they made her look as strong as she could possibly look here without actually winning the match. She didn't tap out. She passed out. So I thought this was good. Main event was Tommaso Ciampa defending the NXT Championship against the former champion Aleister Black. This was very good. I have seen better matches involving both of these guys. It wasn't even the best match on this show, but it was still very good. I thought that it was the third best, actually, after that tag team match. Ciampa worked over Black's knee for a good part of this match. Ciampa pulled up the mats outside to expose the concrete, much the way Johnny Gargano did earlier in the show. But he did not have a chance to actually use it, unlike Johnny. Black hit a Black Mass kick in the ring, but was too slow to cover Ciampa in time for the 3 count. Ciampa hit his finish 4 times in this match. Talk about just abusing a finish. 4 fairy tale endings it took for him to finally pin Aleister Black. And I did love the spot where, before the last one, Black tried one last time for a Black Mass kick, but his knee gave out. He got halfway through the motion and he shrieked in pain and couldn't do it. And that's when Ciampa hit his finish one last time and got the relatively clean pin, too, is what Ciampa got here. So then Johnny Gargano, as they're going off the air, this is kind of their trademark thing, right? We see either Gargano or Ciampa on screen. The little copyright box comes out, but the show ain't over. So as Ciampa's posing with the championship in the aisleway, here comes Johnny Gargano. He's got his North American title. Ciampa has his NXT title. And they both hold the titles up high. And that's how they went off the air. I did briefly think that we were going to get a recreation of the spot they did when Ciampa turned on Gargano, where Gargano was going to grab him and throw him into the LED boards, but we didn't get that. And it just makes things very interesting now, because there's a couple of different options they have here. Are we going to get a heel DIY reunion for a while? I mean, they could do it for maybe a month. I don't really see it going on for that long. Or is Candice going to convince her husband, try to talk some sense into him, and convince him that Ciampa is the enemy here, and you need to go for revenge one last time? And they do a winner-take-all match at the next TakeOver show in Brooklyn for both championships. And that can be where Johnny Gargano finally gets his big crowning moment and wins the NXT Championship. And then they could always pull, what they did at WrestleMania 6, where, okay, you can't defend both belts, and, the North American title is vacated and put up at a tournament or something. But, I think we're headed for winner-take-all for both championships WrestleMania weekend. And if so, what a story. Talk about long-term stories being told in this company here. Gargano did go heel. They'd have to find a way to get him back to a place where everybody knows that the old Johnny Gargano is back and you've got to cheer for him and get behind him. But, think how far back this story goes now, well over a year. And to think that this is what it looks like they've been building to, unless I'm way off here, this sure does look like this is going to be the main event of that TakeOver show. And that has to be where Gargano gets his big crowning moment. He's never been the NXT champion before. Ciampa was able to just fuck this guy over so many times. At some point, you've got to get revenge. And Johnny Gargano, I think, is a better babyface than he is. He's good whatever role they have him in, but he is just the quintessential babyface. It would be a shame for him to eventually get called up to 205 Live, let's say. I know I just freaked people out by saying that, but damn well that's a possibility. That's where he's headed eventually. But it would be a damn shame for him to get called up without ever having that one. He won the North American title on this show, but still, he never really had that one big crowning moment where he got his revenge on Ciampa and he finally won the big one. And if ever there was a place for it to happen, it's WrestleMania weekend.